I've been reading some scary stories online and decided it was time to share one of my own. This happened in the fall of 1993 when I was 20 years old. This was before I started college, and I was working in the material prep department of a plastics factory on the night shift. I was the only woman in the department, and my male coworkers were initially skeptical that I could handle the job, but I proved myself and earned their respect. It was hard work, but on the plus side, it also put me in the best shape of my life. It was also about this time that I had dumped my abusive boyfriend. He was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, and was also an alcoholic. This fact, more than anything, is probably why I got myself into this situation in the first place. I had just gotten off work. It was around 1:30 a.m. My car was running on fumes, so I stopped at a local gas station to fill up. While I was pumping gas, a woman about my age approached me, looking nervous and scared. She said that she had been at her boyfriend's house, and they'd had a fight. She had walked to the gas station to use a payphone and call a friend to pick her up, but on her way to the station, a car pulled up as she was walking, and the guys inside started catcalling and harassing her. With a slight movement of her head, she indicated a car that was parked off to the side by the gas station dumpsters. I saw a large, light green car, like a Caddy or a Lincoln, with at least 2 or 3 shadowy figures inside. She said they threatened her, and she was too scared to call her friend and wait. The woman was neat, well-dressed, and didn't seem high or drunk or anything like that. She just seemed really nervous and freaked out, so I didn't even hesitate. I finished pumping my gas and told her to hop in the car, that I'd take her home. At that time on a weeknight, there was little traffic, so I booked it right out of the station and asked her where she lived. She kept twisting around in the seat to see if the car was behind us, and when I asked her to put her seatbelt on, she ignored me and kept looking for the car. I assumed she was just scared. A few blocks down the road, however, I noticed she was looking around the car, and she started asking me about money. "Where's your purse? Where's your bag? I need money. You need to give me some money." My stomach sank. I have this woman in my car, and now she's gonna rob me. Fuck. But when I thought about it, robbery just didn't make much sense. I was driving a 1985 Chevette, affectionately nicknamed Shitbox, and was wearing my work clothes, a ratty t-shirt and jeans with combat boots. I did not look like a person with a lot of cash, primarily because I wasn't a person with a lot of cash. She twisted around in the seat again and started yelling, "There they are! There they are!" She didn't sound scared anymore. I checked the rear view, and sure enough, the light green car was right behind me. She started cackling and bouncing up and down in the seat. "My boys are gonna fuck you up, bitch! They're gonna fuck you up!" She was laughing like crazy, opening the glove box, looking in the back for a bag or purse, and telling me all the messed up shit these guys are planning to do to me. Now, if I had been smart, I would have just driven to the police station. Actually, if I had been really smart, I would have called the cops at the gas station and waited with her until they arrived. That would have been the intelligent thing to do. Unfortunately, none of this crossed my mind until later. In the moment, I just got really, really fucking angry. I realized 3 things all at once. 1, there was an intersection up ahead, with cars on either side waiting to cross, and the light had just turned yellow. 2, I had a spare box cutter that I kept for work in the driver's side door compartment. 3, this crazy bitch still hadn't put on her seatbelt. I didn't think. I floored it and passed under the yellow light as soon as it turned red. I glanced back to see if the green car was still behind me, but the cross traffic at the intersection had started to move and they hadn't caught up. The bitch started yelling. I slammed on the brakes and she hit the dash and windshield with a solid and viciously satisfying crack. When she rebounded to the passenger seat, I had the box cutter in her face and was screaming something seriously batshit crazy. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I do remember screaming for her to get out of my car before I cut her face off and made her eat it. The crazy screaming and box cutter combo worked. She grabbed blindly at the handle and popped the door open, and I started shoving and punching her until she tumbled out of the door to the curb. I stomped on the gas, got to the next turn, and squealed around it with the passenger door still open. I made a few more turns because I was afraid that the green car might catch up to me. After a little while, I stopped to close the passenger door. and then I cut across town to get on the highway to go home. I was on the highway for about 5 minutes before the shakes started. I pulled off to the shoulder to calm down and get my shit together, and then I drove home. When I got there, I told my older sister, who I was living with temporarily after the breakup. She wrapped me in a tight bear hug while simultaneously yelling about how stupid I was for not going to the police. I've never been so glad to be yelled at in my life. Reading stories here has taught me so much about keeping myself and others around me safe. This story is about a time that these new skills came in handy. I was 18 at the time, 25 now. My mom and I were regular attendees at the local church. We both went to different midweek groups. I met with some of the younger crowd, and my mom went to one with some of the middle-aged people. My mom's group was about half a mile from our house, and we didn't own a car, so she would often just walk there on her own to get there for the 7:30 start. This was reasonable in the summers because it wouldn't get dark until around 9 p.m. When her group meeting ended at 10, she would call me, and I would head over to meet her and walk her home. We always ran into each other on the way, not too far from our group since I would leave first, but we would stay on the phone until we saw each other, just in case. On this one night, everything was going as usual at first. She called, I got my trainers on, locked the house, and began jogging to go meet her. I usually ran on my way over to get some cardio in, good training for rugby. Also, despite being a big guy, I have an overactive imagination, and I get creeped out when I'm alone in the dark. In order to meet Mom, I had to cross our local park and get through a dark patch of trees behind some of the local houses. It was usually just before these trees that we met. We were chatting about her evening and who she saw at our group while I started my run over, but suddenly she said, "Joe, hurry up. I think someone's following me." My heart rate went through the roof. Still with quite a bit to go until I got to our usual meeting spot, I started panicking and took off sprinting. I told her to stay calm while I continued updating her about my progress down the road. She's a tough chick, thick-set and strong but short. I know she can usually take care of herself, but the idea of her alone at night with a stranger following her was horrifying. I heard her scream through the phone, and could also hear it in the distance ahead. "Get the fuck away from me! What do you want? I don't have any money. You can have my phone if you want it." I'd only ever heard her swear once before, so I began panicking more knowing that she felt cornered. I ran like I've never run before. The distance I had to cover usually took me a good 45 to 60 seconds to run, but I did it so much faster that time. It's amazing how your body has this whole other level of physical exertion when adrenaline kicks in. I could see them in the distance, my mom's screams piercing through me. I could see that the man had her by the hair and was dragging her down the road. She was fighting back hard. I shouted towards the attacker to get the fuck away from her and rushed in. He was tall but hardly had any weight to him. I remember charging towards him, but the rest is still a complete blur. I only found out what happened next through stories from my mom. The man saw this hulk of a man charging him and immediately let go of my mom's hair. She fell to the ground sobbing, and the man tried to run away, but I caught him easily and took him down. Apparently, I took him clean off the ground before smashing his head and shoulder into the pavement. I was completely blacked out by that point, and ended up headbutting him and repeatedly beating his face until a nearby neighbor heard the screams and called the police. It wasn't until I was dragged off the man that I saw the blood and scratches on my arms. Luckily, the police arrived quickly to interview us and make sure we were okay. Apparently, they thought I was the attacker originally, which I can't be too surprised about. The guy ended up having a record for robbery and mugging, and is thankfully now in jail. I've never been so scared in my life. I had always imagined situations like this where I was the hero saving people, but I always wondered if, when it came down to it, I would be able to react when the moment came. Thankfully, I haven't had to since. This story takes place in my home country, where people typically believe in the paranormal. I was around 18 at the time and was home alone. It was late at night, around 11 p.m. I had gotten into a fight with my boyfriend earlier that night, as teens tend to do. Naturally, it got overdramatic. There was yelling over the phone and tearful confessions. When I hung up, an idea popped into my mind. It's probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. I decided to walk to his house and confront him face to face. The gated community he lived in was only about a 15-minute walk away from mine, but the distance was comprised of dimly lit roads. If you were driving past, you wouldn't be able to see anyone on the sidewalk. People just don't walk there at night because of how dark it gets. Despite this, I threw on some shorts, sneakers, and a sweater and headed out. People have said that I have a very Asian doll look. Bangs, long straight dark hair, and pale skin. I'm only about 5 feet tall, and could still pass for 12 if I really wanted to. Basically, I'm the last person in the world who would look threatening, which doesn't bode well for me in most situations. Still, that night, I was angry. Deep down, I knew that walking over there was fucking dangerous, but I refused to listen to my own internal warnings and set off at a brisk pace towards my boyfriend's neighborhood. It was dark. There was no one on the street. I was completely alone and very pissed. So pissed that I suddenly got a nosebleed. I get nosebleeds when I'm stressed out, so sure enough, out of nowhere, blood gushed from my nose and splattered all over my clothes. It was like a running faucet. I wiped the blood away aggressively as I walked, and soon enough, my hands were covered in blood too. My face was tear-streaked and blood-stained. I looked like a mess. Nevertheless, I was too pissed off to stop or turn back or even care. I kept walking, even more pissed now that my clothes were ruined. Then, I saw them. I froze. I had just crossed the street. There was a wall around another gated community to the left of the sidewalk, and to the right there was a road. I saw figures moving. Men. Around 4 or 5. It was so dark I couldn't see their faces, but I could see that there was a ladder leaning against the wall. One of them was on it. They had been talking, and I could see the glint of tools hanging from their belts. A saw, hammer. At first I thought they were repairmen, since it's normal around here for public repairs to be done late at night so that they don't get in people's way in the morning. Like any girl alone at night, though, I went from angry to terrified. A group of men in a secluded area doesn't usually end up good for anyone. I was going to turn around and flee in the other direction, but it was too late. Before I could leave unnoticed, they had seen me, all turning their heads towards me at the same time. For a brief moment, we all just stared at each other. It happened so fast that I didn't even have the chance to look scared. My expression was just blank. I moved to start running away, but paused when one of them yelled. It wasn't an angry yell, though. It was a high-pitched, trembling scream that trailed off into nothing. The other men started cursing and they scrambled away from the wall. I was shaking, thinking that they were about to run for me, but as it turned out, they were actually scared shitless. I realized this when they all took off towards their car, parked right beside the sidewalk, leaving their ladder behind. They were still cursing and yelling at each other to hurry up. Once they were all in the car, they pulled off the fastest, most impressive U-turn that I've ever seen in my life, and drove off in the other direction. That's when it dawned on me that I was standing there, looking like a bloody China doll, and they must have thought I was a ghost. I almost started laughing right then and there, but I was too shaken up by what had just happened and hightailed it to my boyfriend's house. About a week later, I saw in the papers that there had been a string of robberies in our area. The robbers would bring a ladder, lean it against the wall of a gated community, and sneak into the houses around the border of the subdivision. The police figured out their plans when they found a ladder that had been left behind that night. One of the more recent robberies had led to a maid being killed by the thieves, and I still wonder to this day what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that nosebleed.